Hi everyone, Nubkeks here, and in today's video, I'm going to be giving you an introductory course to the most powerful tool you have in World of Warcraft as a player to improve in your raiding skills. This is mostly aimed at, let's say, ambitious heroic players, or more so players that are looking to get into Mythic or to up their skills in Mythic. In my opinion, to be a Mythic raider, having some basic competence here in understanding logs on Warcraft logs is incredibly important, and it's going to be something that your guilds are going to be doing as well, your teams are doing as well. So to get one of these logs, personally, someone in your group has to log with an add-on like Exorcist Raid Tools, upload them to Warcraftlogs, and then all of this info will be stored there. This one we're looking at here is an example of our rekill of Sludge Fist Mythic, our first rekill. I think it's a good example because if we look at deaths, we have a lot of deaths. So I think this is a great example. And also a fight where there's lots of bursty damage done by the players and also done by the boss, the sort of patchwork boss fight of the tier. So I think it's a really good way to show you some examples of what you're looking to do with logs. So there's a lot going on here. Logs are very intimidating for a lot of players the first time they see them. Let's take a look. First of all, we're going to look at these tabs. We're going to go to the number one most important tab. Which one of these is the most important? I'll give you a clue. No, it's not your damage done and your damage meters. It's not that. Which one is the most important? Okay, the most important tab is the deaths tab, guys. This is like the mantra. I think it's the mantra of Method. Way back, I'm thinking back in like Battle of Desire lore. I think I remember them saying this, which was play average, don't die. This is how, like, I think because they were world first at the time. Play average, don't die. That is the goal here. So the deaths tab, this gives you info in terms of when you died, what killed you, and how. So there's a number of different ways of reading this. As a player, what you're looking for is what killed me, what is killing me, right? Because that's what you need to do. You need to know how you die. Every single time you die, you want to know exactly what happened, why it happened, what you could have done differently, what you should have done differently. As a player, that's really important. Now, if you are a healer, or if you are a raid leader or an officer or something like that, it's different. You want to just have an overall understanding of where just the general raid is struggling to help adapt your tactics for those mechanics, adapt your healing cooldowns or whatever, right? That's a bit more complicated. But for just a player, you want to know, where did I die? So to give you some examples, and sorry to my raid team. Sorry, guys. Let's look at this one. This one is actually interesting. So number one, you can see... you see like a chart, the few seconds leading up to your death, and you can see the health spikes and stuff like that. You also see a complete breakdown of what's happening. Now you're looking for like the big numbers here, the big hits, and like the big hit, the killing hit here. This is why I'm laughing. Is giant fists. This is a tank mechanic hitting a marksmanship hunter. Sludge fist melee attack carries through to the next closest player within 5 yards. If no other player is found, the primary target is struck twice. Basically, you've got your two tanks stood on top of each other and it hits them. So this is unusual. So this is another tool you can use if we go into like a replay window. So this is the replay window, which is really cool. You can look at the fight and you can see positioning throughout the fight. You can see this is, for example, the seismic shift circle, so making sure they don't overlap, all that sort of stuff, blah, blah, blah. So he died at about 4 minutes. So let's look at that. So coming up to this, again, you can choose the particular player, which makes them larger. Is this him? Okay, it didn't really make him all that much larger. That's him right there. The two tanks are over here. So this is the chain mechanic of Sludge Fist, where he grabs some players at range, pulls them in, and if we zoom in, so they get hooked in. It's kind of unlucky, right? That's pretty unlucky. Walks past the tank trying to get away, yeah, gets smacked. Actually gets closer. That's rather unlucky. But at the same time, this is also, again, as a player, this is something to be aware of and go, oh, yeah, yikes, bit unlucky, but let's not make that mistake again. Okay, I'll be more careful next time not to walk near the tank, right? So it's about looking at that and going, this, I know exactly what killed me. I know, I can see it. This is what the log is for. And then adapting to that. Again, if we look at another couple examples, again, you can see the health spikes here. So what is happening? Colossal Roar is the killing blow, which is just unavoidable burst of raid damage. Okay, Falling Rebel, this here is the bigger mistake, which is 40,000 physical damage, 2 seconds stun. This is a swirly on the ground that you want to avoid. So this player got hit by that and then obviously died because of it. This one here, Eliari. Here we have another interesting example. So this is also something that could happen. What is a fractured impact? So a fractured impact is actually, it's not a player error. This is a raid team error. Basically on Mythic Sludgefist, when he hits a pillar, it shatters into 4 different soaks, right? You have to have a player, at least one, stood in each one of those soaks. Then it splits into 2 different soaks. And again, you need at least 1 player in every single soak. If one of those soaks does not get soaked, it will do 40,000 physical damage, or 50,000, excuse me, physical damage to every single person in the raid. This would typically be a raid wipe. I guess apparently it wasn't. No, we actually lived it, believe it or not, which is unusual. But again, in this particular case, again, looking at this from a player perspective, as a raid leader, you know, you look at that and go, oh God, why are we missing that soak? Again, this is something you'd go and look into in more detail, make sure that players know where they're supposed to be. Are we there at the right time? What exactly went wrong? Could just be a mistake. But again, this is something you would want to look into. As the particular player here, though, if I am Eliari and I look at this, I want to know, again, why did I die? What could I have done differently? What should I have done differently? In this case, I was very high on life, and then I got killed by, again, a raid team error. So you go, okay, well, I mean, this is a collective group effort. There's 8 different soaks. Was I doing my part at least? You know, was I in the right place? Was I doing the soak that I'm supposed to do? Was I there? If I was, I mean, I literally did everything I could and I still died. It's not my mistake, though. It's just, you know, a general mistake. So in that case, you go, okay, there really was nothing I could have done differently. Excuse me. So again, it's understanding that stuff, and then you actually know why you died, and then you can make adjustments. So that's really important. Let's look at the next most important tab, which is damage taken. Again, these are not the flashy tabs, right? We're not looking at, oh, what's my healing? What's my damage? Yes. Because that stuff, believe it or not, is not as important. Not as important. Damage taken tab. So we need to change this because straight away, by default, you can see over here, this drop-down menu, we're looking at damage taken by friendly. This is basically useless. Surprise, surprise. The 2 tanks are taking the most damage. Who would have guessed it? Typically speak, I mean, sometimes there is some useful information here, but typically speaking, not very useful. You often find like Havoc Demon Hunters are at the bottom because they don't take any, they passive damage reduction to magic damage. Wouldn't help them on Sludgefist. It's mostly physical, but you get the idea. This is much more useful. Damage taken from a ability. So switching into this, and now we have much more useful information. And again, this is your go-to place to understand what is actually doing damage. Here's the list. These are the different sources of damage. There's no other sources of damage. You know, you're not going to get an enemy fire mage just blink in and greater pyroblast you to the face. That's not going to happen. It's in a raid fight. This is the damage. This is all the damage. Understanding where it comes from, what it does. So let's look at some examples. In fact, let me first of all show you, where is it? It's not fractured boulder, fractured debris. Is it fractured impact? Fractured, all the fractures and everything's fractured. But this one actually did fucking 500,000 damage to the raid. That's kind of funny. But look at this. We can see again, this is where he died, right? Fractured impact. It's that once off. Look at that. If you look at the total damage right there, this is why I say it's normally a raid wiping mechanic. The biggest spike of damage in this fight is that. So that's something to watch out for. The interesting thing, actually, Sludgefist is funny enough because although there are individually large spikes, you can see that on the whole, it's actually quite a steady graph here. On other fights, you'll have much more varied graphs of damage where it looks a lot differently. You know, there'll be certain phases which are dangerous and certain which aren't. But Sludgefist is relatively steady, though it does sort of slowly increase. How is that happening? Crumbling Foundation is actually the biggest source of damage. Whenever he hits a pillar, it just starts doing damage every second and the effect stacks. So I think a lot of people probably don't even know about this. Crumbling Foundation. So here you can see in the graph, if I remove the total damage, this is what it looks like. This is the main source of damage on the fight. It's this slow damage that builds up over time. If you're a healer, you'll probably be more aware of it, or even any player on Mythic Sludgefist. It gets harder to stay alive as the fight goes on. This is one of the main reasons, in fact, probably the main reason. It's just that there's ever increasing steady passive damage, which makes it harder to live those overlaps of damage, which is the big thing we're looking for. Dangerous overlaps, which lead to deaths, right? What are the dangerous overlaps that lead to deaths? Colossal Roar. This is a big roar, does 19,000 sonic damage. What does that look like? This is going to be much spikier. So again, it's these big individual spikes. You can see in total, it's a big chunk of damage taken per second whenever this hits. And again, we're looking for those overlaps. Seismic shift is another one. This is the circle. I think you saw the preview when we looked at the replay where people have to spread out because you can cleave each other with this. Again, it's 17,000 physical damage, seismic shift. So again, we can click this and we can see it. And what we'll be looking for here, again, you'd be looking for some overlap. So for example, like right here, we've got a seismic shift into a colossal roar. So that's maybe a little bit sketchy. You know, you have to make sure that you are, you know, topped up. They're pretty spaced out though. If you compare that then to something like, again, this is basically the same overlap right over here where you got seismic shift and colossal roar, and they're almost definitely evenly spaced out, just the same as this. But this one's more dangerous because that passive damage has gone up more as the fight's gone on. So understanding that. Chain link, which is just passive damage happens to the whole raid as you are linked together. Destructive impact. So if I show you chain link, this is just whenever you're chained. Again, it's just passive damage, which never changes throughout the fight. It's just always there, just for the healers to heal. And destructive impact is when he hits the pillars and it does big bash. Big bash to the raid where he hits the wall at the very end. And then meleeing the tanks and stuff like that. Now, also on top of this, so again, you're looking for those big overlaps and the big sources of damage, and working in tandem with deaths to figure out what's actually going to kill you. Now, sometimes, right, sometimes it's not going to be the biggest sources of damage that are dangerous. So this is where understanding the fight comes into effect. So for example, I think a great example here is falling rubble. Here, there's me being hit. So if we look at falling rubble, this is the mechanic we talked about where there's a big swirly, a big brick falls from the ceiling. It stuns you for 2 seconds and hits you for, what was it, 40,000 physical damage? I think it's 40,000. Yeah, I don't know where it is. There it is. Yeah, like 40,000 physical damage, stuns you for 2 seconds. It's bad. This is avoidable, right? So this is an avoidable mechanic. Although it is low on the overall meter, because it's avoidable, this is very dangerous, right? So if you get hit by this right before one of these big spikes of like a colossal roar or a destructive impact or something like that, you're in trouble because that's going to kill you. You only have so much max health. And in fact, if we look at this stuff, I think nearly all of these were actual deaths. If we look at deaths, these fallen rubble hits. So he died from falling rubble. Ymira actually directly died from the falling rubble. This is an absorb bar for me as a priest because I think I was already dead intentionally to heal more. Holy priest things. And then Melinda, he actually didn't die. But you can see out of those that literally 3 of these hits are related to deaths, basically. So that's something to really, really watch out for. That's really important. So yeah, again, that's understanding this sort of stuff, right? It's understanding this sort of stuff, essentially keeping avoidable stuff as low as possible. It should really be 0. So you're really aware, okay, this is avoidable. I don't want to get hit by that. Okay, watch out for that. And again, that will tie in with the deaths and stuff like that. So that's your damage taken. That is your damage taken. If we look at damage done then, let's use Sapphic as an example because he's absolutely clapping here. So this is pretty good. In fact, if we come back, if we look at total, this is a very specific fight because the boss takes double damage whenever he hits a pillar. So you can actually see that the suffix is, in fact, it's almost as if the total damage meter is modeled off of Sapphic. He's a fire mage, so they're going to be bursting a combust into the boss at these particular points. So again, you can see very visibly, these graphs, right, where this stuff happens. The biggest spike is here with Bloodlust. He's got Bloodlust on his combust, hitting the boss. He probably has a potion at the same time, and that stuff's going into it. So again, like one thing that you could often do is if you open up Warcraftlogs, you want to compare to other players. And there's a few different things you can do here. So if we look at Sludgefest, we go to rankings. This brings up everything, which is not very useful. It's also half in Chinese these days. So I recommend switching it to whatever region you're from so you can actually understand the names of the abilities. That's always useful. And then we can switch this over. Let's go for he's a mage. We'll go to fire mage. Now, one of the things I want to show you straight away because it's really, really cool and really useful. If it loads, please load. I'm going to drink some tea while we wait. This is actually worrying. Maybe it's not going to work. Oh, no, there we go. Okay. So one thing that it does that's really useful is it actually shows you the breakdown of the most popular talents, most popular trinkets, most popular covenant abilities, covenants, conduits, legendaries, all that sort of stuff. So for example, we can see they're all using Firestarter, Shimmer, Rune of Power, Flame On, Frenetic, Frenetic Speed, conflagration mostly, and kindling. Most popular trinkets. Every single mage in the top 100 mages, every single one is using the Sinful Gladiator's Badge of Ferocity. 72% using a Soul Igniter, 26% Imperial Ordnance, and 2% Kabbalah's Hymnal. You can see whatever soul binds. You can see conduits. And in terms of legendaries, again, 100% of mages are using fire mages. The top 100 are using Disciplinary Command. Again, you can see this coming through. You can see the legendaries. You can see how many power infusions they got, or Benevolent Fairies as well. Just these external buffs. I think it might include innervates and stuff. I'm not sure. But you can see that sort of stuff. But if, for example, let's just take one guy that got no buffs. So shout out to Kjotmace. Sorry for mispronouncing your name. If we look at... Are these like a Swedish guild? Skirblege. Yeah, they're definitely Swedish. Okay, so again, you could take a top log and you can compare them. You can use the compare feature, but honestly, here as a beginner, you don't need to worry about that. It's not that much trickier, but it's a little bit trickier to set up. You can just compare these one for one. So straight away, we can see that, well, our fight is longer, so we can cut that out. That's fine. Let's take it from 445. It's a nice 444, I guess, is what we're going for. 444, 3 4s. We can come here similarly to 444, and we can actually compare like for like. And you can see, again, just visually compare how everything's doing. You can see spiking at 40k. This went up to 45. Sapphics is pretty much almost there here. He's a little bit lower on the first one, pretty much there on the final one. Again, it's very good logs. And again, you can see, once again, your damage sources, which is really useful. Which of my abilities are actually doing damage, right? Which one hits the hardest? All that fun stuff. See, these are the Pyroblasts. Ignite's doing this much damage. And again, one great thing to do is to compare. Okay, Kjotmace is doing 1.2 million damage with 77 casts of Pyroblast. In the same time frame, Sapphics is doing 1.19 with 75 casts of Pyroblast. It's pretty much bang on. It's pretty much bang on. So there you go. And again, comparing these different sources. So what you might look for and see is, well, are there any sort of weird things where they're not there? So, I mean, like one, he's got some damage from Entropic Embrace because he's a Void Elf. And obviously this guy doesn't have that. I see Blazing Surge. He did 230 damage with Blazing Surge, where Sapphics only did 86k. So that probably could be used a bit better, for example. I mean, it's a small thing, but it sort of adds up. So again, you could look at this and we could look at, if we remove these and just see it visually, or in fact, you could just click the actual thing and see it. If we look at these Blazing Surge sources, we can see that, okay, Kjotmace has landed a Blazing Surge for a bit of damage on every single one of these pillars. And he's just hitting for much more. So that's something that I actually genuinely don't know how the trinket works. How does it work? Activate sacrificing health over 15 seconds to empower it. Reactivate it to cast it. Plus 40% additional damage based on how long it was active. Okay, so quite possibly it's doing less damage here for Sapphics with a similar amount of cast, because just in terms of timing, maybe activating it earlier. That brings me on to our next tab, and we are almost done, which is the cast tab. This is very important. This is really, really important. So this will show you how many times you cast your different abilities, and then you can also see where you cast them as well, which is huge. So again, we can do a quick comparison. 77 Pyroblasts, 70 Fireballs. 75 Pyroblasts, 65 Fireballs. So, we're a couple less on the Fireballs there, and you're just looking for these smaller things. The bigger thing is we're going to look for, let's look for big damage cooldowns. Let's look at some flashy stuff. So in terms of, let's say, Combustion, I guess Sapphics probably popped it before Pull. You could actually check this in the buffs if you wanted to. I'll show it to you really fast. I'm sure he did, obviously. Combustion. So again, you can see he did pre-pop it just before Pull. So they actually did both pop it on Pull. We can see here 57 seconds in, 56 seconds in, 1 second earlier. So again, that's a tiny thing, but a sort of thing that you could min-max, right? And again, here, you can see these guys, they're almost doing the exact same thing. They're both very good logs. So that gives you the rough idea. And again, sort of comparing those things and checking out all that sort of stuff. Where are we using these different things? Am I syncing up my trinket with my CD? Yes, I am. Again, you could look for defensives like, okay, we've used Alter Time. We've used Alter Time twice there. This guy hasn't used alter time at all, right? So looking for those different things, checking this stuff, and again, just comparing how many times did I cast my abilities, how many times did they cast their abilities, and also asking yourself why. Why are we using our abilities at those particular times? I think this is a pretty clear example on Sludge Fist, where Combustion wants to be cast for every time Sludge Fist hits the pillar, because it's like if you don't know, for some reason, Combustion is a 10-second damage amp, massive damage amp. The boss takes double damage for 10 seconds. You obviously sync the 2 up. So yeah, that sort of stuff. So that's really important. We would do the same thing with healing. So the same sort of thing with healing is what you'd be looking into. Again, your overall stuff doesn't matter, right? Your overall stuff. So a couple of mistakes people make. So right here, I mean, if we look at the healing stuff, it's like, these are our healers. Man, look at our parses. Are we just shit? Do we just suck? No. Why are the healer parses so low? It's because some people kill this with 4 healers. We've killed it with 5 healers. The damage taken doesn't change because there's a flat number of 20 people in the raid. So all of these damage abilities still do the same amount of damage. So there's only so much healing to go around. But you can certainly look at stuff like in terms of overhealing. So you don't want overhealing to be too high. It's a little bit high here, but not too high. Possibly, again, we got this extra big chunk as people took extra damage there, which, so that happens. So maybe these guys 4 healed it. Let's take a quick little look. These guys do it 4 or with 5? So these guys did it with 4. So they should have much, much better logs if we remove the zoom. So you can see, wow, oh man, are these guys a million times better? No, it's just they have less overhealing, because instead of splitting the same amount of healing between, as we split between 5, they're splitting it between 4. Like their total healing, let's take it from, 430 as a quick reference. 430. So these are just some mistakes. Take it from 4 minutes. I don't want to include that. Obviously, yeah, we can't include the big extra spike there. That's really unfair. Compare like for like, always important. Like in 4 minutes, they did 12.8. We did 12.06. It's almost the same. It's a little bit off, actually. That's a good extra chunk right there. But yeah, I mean, that's basically what you're looking at, though, right? Is that sort of stuff. Same sort of thing happens with damage, so watch out for it. Sludge Fist is actually a good one. Sludge Fist is a good fight. Obviously, people getting power infusions and stuff like that puts it off. But generally speaking, like, again, you can see here with Hot Mice compared to Sapphics, if we discount PIs, the fight is the same. The fight is very scripted. It's a single target boss. And this is pretty much a pure skill thing. You'd watch out for other bosses, like whatever. Let's say, like Sun King Salvation. There's loads of ads, so that's not really going to help you at all, right? What is skillful play on that fight? Well, it's really much more up for debate. It's really much more up for debate, and it's more about, who actually gets to kill the ads first. I think one great example, unfortunately I don't have the log handy, but it was for Council of Blood. On Council of Blood, which these guys wiped to, we don't have it in my logs right there, unfortunately. But on Council of Blood, like, Moonkins often do a lot of damage, because if you look at the targets down there, yeah, Begrudging Waiter, their Starfalls are rolling. We actually had a trial apply today, or yesterday, and I was looking over his logs, and I saw that for them, on their kill of Council of Blood, which I think was a misread in terms of strategy, I think they ran 4 Moonkins. And guess what? You run 4 Moonkins, again, those Begrudging Waiters, the way that it works is basically you're in this room, and from like phase 2 onwards, these waiters start spawning in around the edges, and they sort of wander around. They throw food, which is just some light damage to players. You sort of slowly grip them in with Death Knights and kill them off or whatever. But, you run a Moonkin or 2, and they run Starfall, which just hits everything. And it does loads of AoE damage. And there's very few other specs that are actually going to be doing damage to the waiters, and it's not really that important. It's mostly pad. But yeah, anyway, we had this guild, this log I saw. They were running 4 Moonkins, which meant that all of the Moonkins got terrible damage logs. They all looked like they were bad. Were they bad? No, absolutely not. It's just that there's only so many waiters. They only have so much health. And they're splitting that between 4 players instead of the standard 1 or 2 Moonkins that you would be running. Because again, although they are top DPS on that fight, it's mostly pad. And running extra is not actually helpful, because again, there's only so many ads with so much health, and that's what they're doing damage to. Anyway, we're getting a bit off track. The one other thing to point out, in fact, this replay looks like it's bugged. Sometimes they bug out. Again, if we look at this sort of thing, so for example, if we look at damage to enemy, again, this is a really useful chart here. So you can see damage to these different enemy types. So for example, if you look at total damage done, oh, his Moonkin's absolutely blasting. Yeah, but then again, a lot of that damage is coming from damage to these begrudging waiters, which isn't necessarily, the most useful thing compared to, you might say, like, oh, making sure, again, this is also spec specific, but these dutiful attendants, they're an ad that needs to be killed quickly. So, like, who is doing good damage to that and whatever, and comparing that like for like. So, okay, am I doing, like, whatever, if I could compare suffix, let's say, you say, is Sapphics doing as much damage as Catmice or Crash, right? Compare Fire Mages to Fire Mage for these specific things. Compare Marksman to Marksman for those things. That sort of thing. But that's basically it. They're the main things to look for, right? So I think that's plenty of info, guys. That gets you started. The most important thing is looking at those deaths. Then it's also, so looking at deaths, sources of deaths. What is killing people here? Dark Recital times 3. Bam, 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 got hit a bunch, that's moving incorrectly, whatever. Just understanding what is actually killing people, what should they do differently, what could they do differently, where are things falling apart, damage taken, what are the sources. Again, we don't really care about damage taken. You can see this one's a much spikier fight, much spikier. Why is it spiky? Let's take a look at it. So, Dancing Fever. Look at that, you can see in phase 2 in particular, what are these big spikes? It's the number one source of damage. It's Dancing Fever, which is where you have to jump and it pulses ray damage. It's the mythic mechanic. Or then Oppressive Atmosphere, again, is a ramping thing. That's the second highest thing. Where is it? Oppressive Atmosphere, you can see it ramps up, and every time you phase a boss, it goes away. These are the intermissions where you boogie down. And then apart from that, you can see the damage is quite minimal, really, right? So you got melee hits on the tank, you've got throw food from those waiters, which I was talking about, and Duelist Riposte, which is the tank mechanic. You can see it's only hitting the tanks. Dark Recital, some of that damage. This is a bit confusing because there's the same name used for 3 different abilities. One of them is avoidable and the others aren't. I don't know which one is which off the top of my head. You can see here, there's barely any damage taken. This is pretty much most of it, right? Most of it is Dancing Fever and the Oppressive Atmosphere. So very simple as a healer, right? Or as a raid leader planning your healing CDs, what are we planning for? Where do I use AMZ? That sort of thing. Well, really, Dancing Fever. These are the big spikes. Having healing CDs for those big spikes. Being extra careful, like this one here is dangerous. This one here is much more dangerous because it's Dancing Fever on top of Oppressive Atmosphere. You guys get it. You guys get it. Thanks for watching. Let me know any questions you have. I could do more advanced sort of looks on this as well. But that's a really good basis, which really basically covers everything you could possibly really need to know to be a really good Mythic Raider. Thanks for watching. Catch you next time. Bye-bye.